What's up? This is Amir Alwani from PotentNews.com. Welcome to Amir's Gematria Adventures number 3. Today we're going to look at the first public Black Mass held in Canada, in Ottawa, in the city that I live in. I would have attended outside the place myself if I could have, if I had the energy. But we're going to take a look at what some mainstream media reports of this were, and of the protests that were happening outside the place as well. Then we're going to look at some symbolism, and then we're going to look at Ivan Panin's research, a small sample of it, and then we're going to look at some Gematria. So in the last episode, that was like almost 6 hours of non-stop Gematria, which is essentially finding numbers in language and, you know, associating a letter with a number so that you can add up all the numbers of a name, and using that you can find a lot of interesting coincidences, if you want to call them that. But essentially we're looking at number patterns. And so, as I said recently, this was brought to my attention: Satanic Temple in Ottawa to hold first public Black Mass in Canada. Here's CNS News talking about that. Talking about, by the way, this is from Michael W. Chapman. Talking about a Black Mass is an inversion and mockery of the Catholic Mass, where the ritual is performed in reverse from the end to the beginning and symbolizes the undoing of Christ's sacrifice on the cross and the undoing of Satan's defeat. So, this is what happened. Let's check it out.
Outrage and cries for its cancellation. The first known Black Mass in Canada went ahead as scheduled tonight, but not without protests and demonstrations outside the heavy metal bar where it was held.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace.
The Satanic Temple of Canada Ottawa chapter is hosting the sold-out event. An estimated 200 people praying outside the heavy metal bar where it was held. CTV's Mike Arcelides has just returned from the Coven on Murray Street. Mike, even leading up to it, there were strong feelings that this wasn't appropriate. What was it like being there?
Stefan, an emotional night on a divided Murray Street in front of Coven. 50 invited guests waiting in line to attend the city's first Black Mass unbaptism ceremony, which all week long has drawn the ire of church groups and conservative activists who tonight protested and prayed for those participating in what they believe is an unholy ritual.
There's no place that you can't go where God can't dust you off and use you for the glory of his kingdom.
This is Dory Love, a self-proclaimed preacher, arguing with and protesting to those walking through the doors of the Byward Market Metal Bar. The event, organized by the secular atheist group, the Satanic Temple of Canada, believing in and asserting their freedom and right of religion and expression. On the other side of the street, hundreds of Christians with crosses and rosaries in hand, praying for the souls of the atheists.
A blasphemous act, and the organizer of this event has said it's blasphemous from his own mouth. That is a form of hatred. It's a hatred against our faith. It's a hatred against the culture that built our country, and that's why we're here to show our opposition and also our love and our witness for the people who are going in, because we're genuinely concerned that many of them don't know what they're actually doing from a spiritual perspective.
A lot of people are still living in darkness, absolutely, and God has set me free. God has shown me He is the light of the world, so He has shown me the true light. There's many false lights, so I'm just giving them the option to accept the true light so they can have peace and love and security as I do in Christ.
God is coming quick.
The passion undeniable for religion on both sides of the street on full display in the heart of the Byward Market. One side fighting for the right to practice atheism and the tenets of Satanism and secularism, a rebellion against authority and institutions, while preachers and priests and their followers sing and pray, trying to bring those they believe are astray back to the flock. And the organizers of the event saying it was a success, the Satanic Temple of Canada vowing to continue to freely practice their faith without interruption. Stefan.
CTV's Mike Arcelides reporting live for us tonight. Thank you, Mike.
The friendly town of
Okay,
Almont
so let
and
me
the
pause
confidence
that.
in knowing your new home is built by...
Get out of town
All
this
right,
summer
I'll pause
with
it again.
CAA.
Despite outrage and cries for its cancellation, the first known Black Mass in Canada will go ahead as scheduled tonight. The Satanic Temple of Canada Ottawa chapter hosting the event inside a Byward Market heavy metal bar. And that's where we find CTV's Mike Arcelides. Mike.
Good evening, Stefan. The Catholic Church and conservative groups say that tonight's Black Mass ceremony is a hateful one. And they promise come hell or high water, they will be right here tonight praying and protesting against the Satanic Temple's unbaptism ceremony.
This fruit represents a rejection of that contract.
Ottawa's first Black Mass has many seeing red.
Most masses, most religious ceremonies, they offer something, salvation with Christianity, but this is basically simply to denounce Christ.
Several Catholic priests on hand tonight praying against what they call the desecration of their faith's most sacred tradition.
They got Black Mass, we're bringing the light of Christ.
The Coven Heavy Metal Bar hosting the Satanic Temple Canada's 50 invited guests, all followers of Satanism, atheists congregating, practicing their faith. Coven's owner saying he's been overwhelmed with support here in the community, but he was shocked to find in his mailbox several pamphlets and letters begging him not to host tonight's event. Gospel verses from the Bible saying, Satan, you have lost the war in heaven.
Like, they can believe that we're going to go to hell if they want, but we're going to put it on regardless.
Of course, you have the right to do whatever you want to do. And we have the right there to go and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and tell them to repent.
Upsetting conservative groups protesting the Mass. Coven's owner receiving calls and letters from religious groups south of the border, warning of eternal damnation.
They're saying stuff to the extent of, like, you can't put it on, it's an abomination to God.
Will you be praying for their souls?
I will be praying for their souls. God loves them. They're just lost, and that's why we're coming.
The protesters saying they will be here at 10 o'clock and they will be praying. The event is sold out and begins right at 10 here at the Coven. Stefan.
CTV's Mike Arcelides reporting live on location for us tonight. Thank you, Mike.
All right.
The friendly
I'll
town of
pause
Almont
this
and the...
again, and we'll take a look at this last one here. And I'll pause it again so we miss this.
Ottawa's Archbishop describes an upcoming Black Mass as vile.
The ceremony put on by the Ottawa chapter of the Satanic Temple of Canada will be the first public mass of its kind in Canada.
CTV's Mike Arcelides is live from outside the bar where this mass will be happening. Mike?
Graham, good evening. 50 people have been invited to the Satanic Temple Ottawa chapter ceremony that organizers are calling an unbaptism. These are followers of Satanism celebrating and practicing their faith. And that move has many, including Catholics, upset. Nicholas Mark is a devout member of the Satanic Temple in Ottawa.
We use the idea of Satan symbolically. It has a lot of deeply held meaning to us because a lot of us have identified with that sort of anti-hero character for a very long time.
Satanists celebrating their religion freely in their own kind of church. Saturday night, the church will be this heavy metal bar, Coven, in the Byward Market.
All we're going to be doing Saturday is practicing our faith in private on our own terms, like every other religion does.
This fruit represents a rejection of that contract.
Mark will be one of 50 people inside for the Black Mass, all there by invitation only.
What we're doing right now is asserting our constitutional right, our religious right, and doing it in such a way that even though it may make people feel uncomfortable, we're not hurting anyone, we're not targeting anyone. This is for us, by us, end of story.
I think we need to look at the issue.
But Ottawa's Archbishop Terence Prendergast calls the ceremony an attack on one of Christianity's most sacred ceremonies. My concern is for the faith of our people and the offense that this brings. A black mass is vile and sacrilegious, attacking the most sacred reality of our faith, the consecrated host, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. Mark says the Satanist ceremony isn't going to use a holy consecrated offering, and his religion shouldn't be considered a threat to the Catholic Church or any other church.
I think that if people have faith in their Catholicism or their Christianity or whatever they have faith in, then they shouldn't be worried that someone else is going to come along and threaten that.
The owner of the space saying this has actually very little to do with religion and more to do with promoting democracy and free speech. Back in his home country of Iran, a heavy metal band subject to 74 lashes and 14 years in prison simply because of the music they played.
One of the reasons many people come to Canada is because it's a secular country and, religion and state are separate.
The owner facing threats, receiving these letters from concerned Christians in West Virginia, asking he not host the event.
They just call and they say, oh, this is bad, you shouldn't do this is sacrilegious. I'm like, hey, they're not hurting anyone.
His customers agree.
When you want to believe in God, you want to not believe in God, that's fine.
Persecution for something you don't believe in personally creates more hatred than allowing somebody to express themselves.
Mark and the Satanic Temple vowing this won't be their last ritual. The Archbishop saying he'll be spending his Saturday morning in a parish church with a mass of reparation. Patricia.
All right, an interesting one tonight. CTV's Mike Arcelides reporting live for us.
Okay, so there you have it, and I should say that maybe a year ago or several months ago or something, I was at a mall somewhere near here, and I actually bumped into this guy. I ended up commenting, at least I'm pretty sure it was this guy, unless, a lot of the people in this group have this specific tattoo on the back of their neck, but I struck up a conversation because I wanted to let him know that this sigil of Lucifer right here was also basically the Google Play icon. I had seen things like this in my research before, and the guy was pretty respectful. I didn't get any evil vibes or anything like that from him, but he did mention that he was the leader of the Satanic Temple, and I should say that is different than the Church of Satan, or let's say Michael Aquino's Temple of Set. So this would be the Satanic Temple. I'm pretty sure that that's what this guy said, that he was the head of the Satanic Temple. And like I said, how many people are going to have even if they are Satanists, it's not like every single Satanist is going to have the sigil of Lucifer on the back of their neck. But anyway, so I mentioned this to him. I also might have mentioned this, which was the fact that the Google Chrome icon is also 3 6s on top of each other. I may have also mentioned this. This is apparently a tweet from Sarah 8 Smiles. I had saved that, and apparently the Google, the Gmail icon is also similar to an award that Freemason is given. So you have that. I might have also mentioned this, that www, when you enter in a website, would be analogous to Vav. I believe this is the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet here. And so, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but I've talked about this in previous things I've released, that this splash on the O in the Ottawa logo makes this O technically 3 6s. So that's 666 right there, and of course that's the mark of the beast. So anyway, yeah, I ended up having I was just waiting for a friend outside the mall, and I noticed that, so I ended up having a 10-minute conversation with this guy or whatever, so I found that interesting. And so what else did I want to say? Yeah, okay, so also here's Akora Village. This is also in Ottawa. I don't know if they have these outside of Ottawa as well. And, you know, so I'm actually you guys might have heard me say in previous broadcasts that I'm a tarot reader. And so obviously, while I am going to point out some Bible numerics later in this video, I personally don't agree with the part of the Bible that says you should cut off the hands of the fortune teller. So, you know, and also in previous broadcasts, I've brought this to people's attention. This is pretty common knowledge now among people who look into this kind of thing. You know, you have the Christian cross here can be folded into a cube, which is also found here in the Star of David and in the Kaaba in Mecca. And also technically on the North Pole of Saturn as well. And here we have the 9/11 memorial in New York. And of course, in Gematria, you can find that Saturn equals 119 in the... here, let's put all ciphers. Saturn 119 via the Francis Bacon cipher, which takes into account capital letters. So this, how this would work is you have S would, or the capital S rather, would equal 45. Small a would equal 1, as you can see here, and so on and so forth. You add them all up, you get 119. Okay, so long story short, basically Saturn is synonymous with Satan. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening in Ottawa because, well, first of all, we had a sinkhole in the pretty much the most popular intersection of the entire city, and to me that would indicate like some type of bad karma in general. So basically we found here that this black cube is associated with Saturn and Satan, and here's a photograph that I recently took in downtown Ottawa. Here's this black cube, and here is the John Rudy cube. And we might come back to the numerical value of John Rudy if we have time. This is also in pretty much just a couple blocks away from where that sinkhole happened. This is like downtown Ottawa, near the most popular bus station. This is either a library or a church or something on Rideau Street, and that's basically the downtown Ottawa, and this is what is right beside it. Here you can see that purple stuff. That is actually this. And while that's not a black cube, it's still a cube. Basically any cube will be synonymous with Saturn. And so you have not just one of these, but you have, I'm pretty sure I saw at least 2 or 3 of these along that street. Along Rideau Street, if I'm not mistaken. And here we have right here is a giant spider statue at the National Gallery of Canada. Now, I don't know if this is Louise or Louis. I've seen it spelled 2 different ways. It might be a typo. But we have this creepy looking spider there, you know, so that's going on. We have these cubes all over the place, and we have a sinkhole happen pretty much a block away from where this picture was taken too. So, as I said, the same sinkhole that I just mentioned. There might have been another one somewhere, but near Ottawa, but don't quote me on that. But definitely 2 or 3 years ago, we had a major sinkhole in pretty much the most popular intersection of the entire city. So, you know, I mentioned this just to, again, talk about the shift that's happening, and like, again, I don't want to, by the end of this video, you'll see all of the stuff that, you know, George, what was his name? George Gordon was pointing out in Ivan Panin's research on Bible numerics. So I definitely do, when you see that, when you hear that research, it'll be somewhat obvious that some kind of supernatural force created the Bible. I don't want to say God or anything, but you know, when you look at the amount of number patterns and the coincidences and the way things are structured, it'll become apparent that you would definitely not want. Oh, excuse me. There's I don't know if you can hear that plane out there. I live somewhat close to an airport, so. Anyway, now it's gone. So that ruined my train of thought. I think I was saying that, you know, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I am seeing in general a lot of people are noticing actually that more and more people are moving into the occult and moving into Satanism, various forms of it, and so on and so forth. I had noticed someone. I went to Starbucks the other day, and you know, had a coffee, and near the end of having the coffee, the person who had sold me the coffee walked out, and you know, she went home, and I could see that she had put on this fleece witch hat. So more and more people are moving to witchcraft and whatnot, and you know, I do tarot readings, so I'm not gonna say that, like, you know, don't ever dabble in anything like that or anything like magic or whatnot. I'm also working with the pendulum these days as well, and that's also a form of divination. But a lot of people, they just jump headfirst into this stuff and they don't think twice about it, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I think I've been long-winded enough about this point. So let me see, do I have anything else? No. I guess basically what I'm trying to say is I'm not a Christian and I'm not a Satanist, but I do recognize that a lot of the freedoms that people have had here are based largely on Christian values, and so that's where I stand. I would put Christianity in the same category as you know, obviously Islam and Judaism and so on. So these three monotheistic religions, I think they're called. So apparently, you know, it says here that in the Wikipedia for monotheism that it could include a lot more than that. Maybe even Hinduism here. We found views are broad. Hindu views are broad and range from monism through pantheism and panentheism, etc. But basically, you get the gist. Point being, I don't think Christianity and Satanism are that different, but I do think there's a lot of stuff that people throw away when they just completely see Christianity as like authoritative and, oh, I don't want to be ruled by anyone, and oh, let me do whatever I want as long as I'm not hurting anybody. Like, it's, you know, you have the libertarianism overlapping with Satanism and transhumanism and so on. So, you know, you could, like, you know, a lot of people could use the example of porn, for instance. Like, that would degrade society, but, when using this other type of language, you could say, well, I'm not hurting anybody. Let me do this and that. Who am I hurting? Whereas sometimes the consequences are not immediately apparent. And so that you might not want to immediately just chuck out all of authority and all that kind of stuff. And libertarianism would be sort of, like a sister of anarchy and whatnot. And if you look at the Amir's Gematria Adventures number 2, you'd see some of my analysis showing that authority has the word authority has the same numerical value as the word matrimony. And, no time to get into that here, but, essentially, I do think there is a place for authority, and I think that it might be a little bit short-sighted to completely, just get away from Christianity. And I say that, again, having been practicing tarot for like at least a year now, and having the Bible say to cut off my hands or the hands of the fortune teller. So just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not trying to pick sides here. I'm just laying out the number patterns. You guys can come to your own conclusions. And the other interesting thing that just came to my mind is, like, this spider. Like, if you do a bit of research, the person who made this spider says it reminds him or her, I can't remember again if it's Louise or Louis, but it reminds that person of that person's mother. So that's beyond me how a spider could remind a person of a mother. But what's interesting is that would be the feminine, and Saturn is associated with the moon as well. There's a lot of Gematria alignments there, etc. So that would fit with this as well. And in Pythagorean and Chaldean numerology, the moon is associated with the number 2. And so here you have the second tarot card being the High Priestess, and there's the moon on her head and the moon beneath her feet. And also you could also look at the date of the month of today, which is the 18th of August. And, here's the 18th tarot card, and it's the moon. So that seems to be rather fitting as well. So now let's take a look at Ivan Panin and his research. And this is going to be taken from a podcast by George Gordon, and I'm going to include all this stuff in the notes, the articles about the Black Mass, as well as where you can find the full podcast, which I am going to show you an excerpt of, by George Gordon, talking about this guy, Ivan Panin. And without further ado, let us get into Panin.
And when people ask me, what evidence do you have that the Bible that we have today is true, it's accurate, it's correct? And I say, Bible numerics, number 1. I could say Bible prophecy, number 2. Internal evidences of of inspiration. Number 3, I've got 7 proofs of the Scripture, but I don't have time for all 7. But I do have time for Ivan Panin's Bible Numerics, and let's take it on eyeball to eyeball. In 1882, a young immigrant from Russia graduated from Harvard, and he was an agnostic who often lectured on atheism. But he became a Christian. He was a brilliant mathematician, a multilingual scholar, and he was a literary figure. Panin began to study the Scriptures as a Christian, knowing Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and he began to read them in the original languages. Now, both Hebrew and Greek are unique in that they do not have a numbering system. In other words, they do not use special symbols for their numbers like our Arabic numerals 1, 2, 3, 5, 11, 15, 27. But rather, they use instead the letters of their alphabets to represent numbers. So each letter actually is used as a number. Now, Panin, aware of the numerical values of the Greek and Hebrew alphabets, Panin experimented one day by replacing the letters with their corresponding numbers in Scripture. Now remember, here's Ivan Panin. He's a mathematical genius. He's a Hebrew and Greek scholar. He loves playing with numbers. And suddenly his trained mind saw a mathematical pattern. And as he studied more intensely, his excitement grew, because a few short hours of work had him totally amazed. The verses that he had studied in the Scripture bore unmistakable evidence of an elaborate mathematical pattern far beyond random chance or any human ability to construct. This discovery marked the turning point in his career, and from that time until his death in 1942, Ivan Panin devoted his entire life to the study of Bible numerics. Panin showed, first of all, that the Bible in its original language, that is Hebrew and Greek, is a skillfully designed product of a mathematical mastermind far beyond any human possibility of deliberate structuring. He later supplied a representative of the Nobel Research Foundation with over 43,000 sheets of his studies, accompanied by his statement that this was his evidence that the Bible was the Word of God. Their reply was that as far as our investigation has proceeded, we find the evidence overwhelmingly in favor of such a statement. Panin then issued a challenge throughout leading newspapers of the world to offer a natural explanation or to refute the facts. Not a single person has ever been able to do so. Now here's what Ivan Panin found. Panin found that patterns of prime numbers such as 11, 13, 17, and 23, but especially 7, were found in great clusters. So he would add up the sum of all of the numerical values for different words, sentences, paragraphs, passages, and then whole books in the Bible. And he found the same patterns in each of these forms. He found that the number of words in a vocabulary divides by 7. The number of proper names, both male and female, divides by 7. The number of words that begin with a vowel divides by 7. And likewise, the number of words that begin with a consonant. The number of letters in a vocabulary divides by 7. And those letters, those that are vowels and those that are consonants, also divide by 7. Words that occurred more than once divide by 7, and also words that appeared only once. The number of nouns is divisible by 7, and also the words that are not nouns. They're divisible by 7 also. Even the number of words beginning with each letter of the alphabet, and on it went, until Panin only stayed on the passage long enough to confirm, beyond reasonable doubt, that the statistical evidence for supernatural design was there. But he stated that the longer you stayed on one, it would continue to yield further and further evidences of patterns within patterns until the mind reeled. Now here's a couple of examples. Here's an example from the Old Testament, just the very first sentence in the Bible. Here's the way the first sentence in the Bible reads. It says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." That's cited in Genesis 1, verse 1. Now that's the way it comes out in English, 10 words. In the Hebrew, it is exactly 7 words. These 7 words have exactly 28. That's 14 times 7 letters. There are 3 nouns. They are God, heavens, and earth. Taking the letters of these 3 nouns and substituting their numerical equivalents and then adding them up, you get a combined total of 777. That's 111 times 7. There is one Hebrew verb created. Its total numerical value is 203. That's 29 times 7. The first 3 words contain the subject with exactly 14 letters. That's 2 times 7. Likewise, the other 4 are the object with exactly 14 letters. That's 2 times 7. The Hebrew words for the 2 objects, heaven and earth, each have 7 letters. The value for the first, middle, and last letters in the sentence is 133. That's 19 times 7. The numeric value for the first and last letters of all of the words is 1,393. That's 199 times 7. And the value of the first and last letters of the first and last words of the verse is 497. That's 71 times 7. The value of the first and last letters of each of the words between is 896. That's 128 times 7. And so on and on and on it goes. Now in this verse alone, there are 30 different features of 7. We've only listed 11 of them here. The chance of this happening accidentally is 1 in 33 trillion. Now let's take an example from the New Testament. In Matthew 1, verses 1 through 11, the vocabulary has 49 words. That's 7 times 7. 28 words begin with a vowel. That's 4 times 7. The remaining 21 with a consonant, 3 times 7. 7 end with a vowel, 42 with a consonant, that's 6 times 7. The 49 words have 266 letters, 38 times 7. Out of the 266 letters, 140 are vowels, that's 20 times 7. 126 are consonants, that's 18 times 7. And also of these 49 words, 14 occur only once, 2 times 7. 35 occur more than once, 5 times 7. 42, that's 6 times 7 are nouns, 7 are not. Those remaining common nouns have exactly 49 letters, that's 7 times 7. Male names occur in all 56 times, that's 8 times 7. The names of only 3 women appear in the passage, and the Greek letters of their names add up to 14 exactly. Now, Panin said it would have taken Matthew several months working 8 hours a day to construct the genealogy, even if it were possible. But remember, the names contained in this genealogy were chosen before Matthew was even born. Matthew did not choose Daniel or David. Now, the whole Bible is like this, and this is just taking one small chunk of it and doing it in detail. Every paragraph, every passage, every book in the Bible can be shown to be structured in the same marvelous way. Now, what kind of fantastic collaboration between the disciples could have produced this structure without computers? How could mere fishermen and tax collectors produce this kind of incredible structuring and design? What's really crazy is that Mark is a Roman, Luke is a Greek, Matthew is a Jew, but they all wrote with the same pattern. And each one wrote with their own unique flavor. Mark's style is different, but the pattern is the same right through. And so who wrote the book of Mark? Well, one mind, one author, one God, many different writers, but one writer, one overall writer. Now, can you imagine what kind of mind would do this and then not even care if you ever found out? Now, these are not just words. These are an incredible mathematical pattern, and it dances with its own poetry and mathematics. A computer would go into raptures over this. It's like a building where every piece joins perfectly into one another. And what's really wild is you can't pull even one word out without damaging the whole pattern. So the Bible carries within itself a self-regulating, a self-checking, a self-verifying protection factor. If a person, any person, comes along and says, I don't like this one, the whole pattern then falls apart. This cannot be found in any other religions or any other holy book in the world. The Bible is truly unique.
Okay, so while listening to that and checking some of the bio here, you know, some of the critics here are kind of lame. Like, critics of his work doubt the value of some of his findings and attempt to dismiss more evident numerical patterns as random chance. And I would say nothing is random. If you asked me maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I would have probably agreed that some things are random, but now I'm starting to think otherwise. And so the other thing that caught my eye was, well, before I say that, I'll just say people want to ignore patterns very often so that they can ignore patterns in their own life, because, you know, there's that saying of as above, so below. Like, you know, astrology would indicate stuff that's happening in your life, or, you know, like Marty Leeds pointed out that the Bible would say, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. That's kind of the same idea of the as above, so below. And so in my mind, people would want to ignore patterns, because if they were to not ignore these patterns, then they would discover these tools that they can use to, you know, learn more about themselves and the world around them. And awareness entails responsibility, and it's easier to, you know, stick your head in the sand about things than it is to be aware and then to have to change your behavior accordingly. And that's fine. You know, sometimes people just aren't at the, you know, they don't have the energy to figure out what exactly about themselves needs to be changed, and, you know, where to start or whatever. So that's fine. Everything happens at its own speed. And but for people that just say, oh, this is just random, like, you know, whatever, I'm not too interested in that kind of criticism. And here it says another criticism is that the same kind of numeric patterns can be found in any text, yet the methods used for casual demonstrations of this nature lack the requisite depth to draw conclusions. That's a mouthful, but the fact that you can find patterns in any text, I would go a step further and say that you can find these patterns pretty much everywhere. It doesn't have to be in a text. I would categorize these patterns as in the same category as synchronicity. And so one thing interesting here would be to examine Carl Jung, because he coined the term synchronicity, and basically we're talking about Saturn, and Saturn is Chronos, and so you talk about chronological order, chronic, you know, so this is about time, and Saturn in astrology would be all about time and seriousness and results and contracts and things of that nature. Now, you look at one of Carl Jung's most famous sayings, or I don't know if he said it or wrote it or whatever, but he's known for synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. Now, this is interesting because it is in the Satanic cipher. It would be 66. His name would be 666, just like the number we would find from the LCH Kabbalah cipher, which would be synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. And let me just find that here again. Where are we? Synchronicity. Okay, hold on a second. Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. and we'll enable all the ciphers, and we'll be able to show you this is the LCH Kabbalah cipher. It looks like this, in case you want to know, in case you want to ever calculate this without technology, without the internet, you can do it like this. And so we said the satanic cipher was where you get Carl's full name being 666, and that would be this cipher right here. Oh, this one right here, rather. And so there's even more to it, like, you know, his this is 13 words, and his name, if you take out the middle name in reverse ordinal, Carl Jung would be 130. I've pointed this out many times before, but it's worth putting again here. So that 130 would be analogous to the 13. Anyway, so you can see how this saying itself, in relation to the person who wrote it, is sort of emblematic of what the saying is trying to say, or it's just interesting that there's a number of different synchronicities surrounding this statement about there being lots of synchronicities. That's all. Now, if you you'll also notice that Carl Jung had a cube outside of his tower that he built, and it was this engraved stone here, which basically looks like a black cube, like we just saw at the start of this presentation. And furthermore, you find, we mentioned 666 just now. We mentioned the coven, which means I think it means a gathering of witches, or a group of witches, or something like that. That was the bar in which this Black Mass took place last night, and that would, if you go to their phone number here from Google Maps, it'll show that it ends with 666. That's 4225666. So I don't know if they chose that or if that's coincidence. I would imagine they chose it, but who knows. And so you have this, the coven is at 93 Murray Street, and I found that to be interesting right off the bat, because Saturn equals 93, and we mentioned Saturn is synonymous with Satan and with the darkness and with things that are not easily seen. And you have 93 Murray Street is 69 as well, just like Saturn is 69 in a different cipher, but it's not that different. They're both, the only difference is the reduction, and even in that reduction, it's, you know, it's linear. Anyway, so you have 93 Murray Street is 69, just like Saturn. And here we'll show these ciphers again. Saturn 69 via this reverse ordinal. That's when you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G just backwards. Instead of A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, it's going backwards. And that would be analogous to Saturn. Or no, we're on Saturn right now. It's been a long night. And that would be analogous to the 93 Murray Street being 69 in full reduction, which looks like this. Okay, and then you have 93 Murray Street is also 90 in reverse full reduction, if you reverse that, which would be interesting because you know, 90 equals 33. If you write it out as NINETY, you get 33 in full reduction, which is interesting because Saturn equals 303 in the Satanic cipher. And again, we're talking about a Satanic Black Mass. But there's another Freudian slip or whatever, because math equals 21, just like Saturn equals 21. So you look at these enough, you start to just think in numbers, and that's interesting. So you also have 93 Murray Street. If you do the short form of the street, you get 147. That's very interesting, not only because 119 is there too, I just noticed that now, and of course that would be Saturn in the Francis Bacon cipher, but going back to this other one, 147 of 93 Murray Street, giving you that, and of course the 9 would be a 9 and the 3 would be a 3, and so on. Anyway, that would give you 147, which is interesting because that's the same as Lucifer, and also the same as all these other words that you see here, which include Freemason, they include tarot, they include Seven, which is a movie in which the V is turned into the number 7, underscoring more this Gematria stuff, and you can see either episode 1 or 2 of Amir's Gematria adventures, or it might have been the other video that I did on augmented reality and Saturn symbolism. Forget the full title of that, but you know, that's the one where I covered this movie a bit more. And so you have Fate and Destiny is also 147, just like Form of Energy, and I'll move that so you can see it. Form of Energy is 147, and Energy is 147, and Gematria is 147. We mentioned the John Rudy cube earlier, that's also 147. That John Rudy cube in downtown Ottawa. We also have occult equals 147. And numerology equals 147, and Messiah equals 147, and Lucifer equals 147. So you could say that, like, okay, is that really all in the same cipher, Amir? Well, I don't have time to go and check every single one of these and see if it's in the same cipher, but a number of them are. I already know that from before. So, like, let's say, hold on, so numerology, that one was 147 in the Kabbalah, but let's say occult, yeah, that was 147 Francis Bacon. Gematria, 147 Francis Bacon. What was the other one here? Energy, I think that was also in the same cipher. Energy, yeah. So you know, a fair bit of them are. I've thought about structuring the you know, if I was like 3 or 4 or 5 different people, maybe I would make 3 or 4 or 5 different web brains like this, and have some of them only focusing on one cipher and some of them on the other. But for now, this is the most viable option, and even if less of them were not in the same cipher, I would still say that this is interesting. Anyway, so basically, going back to Panin's stuff, you know, people could say, well, you know, you're noticing these patterns, but they're not proof of divine inspiration. You can find patterns everywhere. I would say maybe you can find, I mean, yeah, you'll find patterns everywhere, but when the words are more coherent, then the numbers are more interesting, and that's something I pointed out in the last Amir's Gematria Adventures. So let me find that. yeah, if the words are not coherent, then the numbers are not interesting. And that would give you 227, which would be in the Chaldean cipher. This one here, and that would be interesting because 22 divided by 7 is pi, and pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. And, you know, if you see only, hold on a sec. Well, the other thing I wanted to show was, where is it here? Yeah. So this pi number is an infinite number. And if you type in what is more interesting than an infinite number in a different cipher, not in the Chaldean, you would find in the single reduction cipher, you would find 227 again. Now, if you just find this kind of thing once or twice, you know, a few times, just like whatever. But the last Gematria video I made with episode number 2 was almost 6 hours of only Gematria, and a lot of it was showing up either 227 or 722, or, you know, 3.14, which is what 22 divided by 7 is. In fact, we found even a lot of instances of 318, which would be found by doing 7 divided by 22. That would give you a 0.318. Anyway, so basically what I'm finding is that when the numbers are so much linked to the letters in general, that when you have more interesting statements, more factual statements, then the numbers are more coherent and show more interesting patterns. And so that would maybe say that, you know, if you're finding a lot of interesting patterns in the Bible, then maybe the Bible has something worthwhile to share. Again, I'm a tarot reader. I don't agree with every single thing in the Bible. I don't agree with the part that says you should cut off the hands of the fortune teller, because I like my hands. I don't want them cut off. But at the same time, I recognize that there is enough valuable stuff in the Bible. And it's not even to say that I've read the Bible, but it's just, you know, clear that, you know, they say by their deeds you shall know them. A lot of people who are completely unhinged, who have no foundation whatsoever, they're a little more lazy, you know, they're a little more lost and whatnot. So I'm not trying to make a sweeping statement, but with technology and with everything that's happening these days, you know, that is serving as a huge distraction at this time. And it's a shame that people are diving headfirst into a lot of stuff that they don't really, for a lot of those people, I'm not going to say everyone, but for a lot of those people, they're not really understanding what they're getting into. So you know, with the rise of popularity and witchcraft and all these things, you know, you're going to get a lot of people casting spells that they'll probably regret later, for example, you know. And if it's a choice between something like that and, you know, them not wanting to do that, or not wanting to explore that area at all, you know, I would err on the side of caution. And again, I would say that if something lasted like this long, like a very long time, then there's probably some good stuff in it, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I think that about does it. No, actually, just a couple more things. Just analyzing some synchronicities with respect to George Gordon's School of Common Law. So you have his show, George Gordon Law Hour and Editorial Review, I think is what his show is called. And if you look at the word George Gordon then you find some interesting stuff. Let me just put this to the base ciphers. Okay, so George Gordon would match Law Hour and Editorial Review. So that, again, I've pointed out many similar things in the past of people's names matching their shows or their favorite movies or whatever. But here it's not immediately apparent how they match because they're different numbers, but you can see that when you reduce them, which is what these small numbers are below these larger numbers, then you find the same numbers. And what that means, reduction, is you just add all the numbers. So 1 plus 3 plus 0 would be 4, just like 1 plus 4 plus 9 would be 14, and 1 plus 4 of that 14 would be 5. So 1 plus 4 is 5. And just like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 is what you would get if you add all these, and that would be sort of the same as this, and we give you 4. So when you press up and down on this website, you can scroll really fast and see that they match. Now, if you want to be picky, then I would say, well, then let's check out School of Common Law. And I would say that would match immediately. You wouldn't even have to do any reduction except for the fact that you're using the cipher, which involves reduction. But that would give you 76 for School of Common Law, just like 76 for George Gordon. So that's interesting. That about does it, if I remember correctly. So there you have it, and thank you for joining me on Amir's Gematria Adventures episode number 3. I would highly appreciate it if you found this valuable. If you are interested by these patterns and you want to see more information and analysis such as this, you can help me do that by going to potentnews.com, going to the top menu and clicking Donate, which would bring you to this page where you can donate via PayPal or Bitcoin. And here's the Bitcoin QR code. This is the Bitcoin address. And I'm going to include most of the pertinent stuff that we saw here in the show notes. So if you want to check the article from CNS or whatever and CTV, and also if you want to hear the full podcast of George Gordon talking about Ivan Panin, you would do that. I'm going to include the high definition MP3 link. It's kind of an old style website here he's got, but he did pass away apparently a few years ago. But if you go to his website, georgegordon.com, and you click radio show, it'll bring you to here, and then you can just do a find and Ivan Panin, and it'll bring you to a number of different Ivan Panin episodes that he's done. But the one that this is from 2007, 7th month, 7th day. And so you can find the different, the lower quality MP3 there. I'll include the broadband link in the show notes. And that about does it. Thank you again for joining me on this Amir's Gematria Adventures. And again, please donate, because these shows don't write themselves. It takes a lot of time and effort inside staring at a screen. So if you want to see more of this, please don't hesitate to even send $1. Even if you send $3, that will help. That will buy a coffee. And I really, really love coffee. So thank you for joining me. Have a good one.